This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Furious Zimbabweans take to the streets across the country in protest over the doubling of fuel prices.
Our future is being destroyed because of one thing: these prices. We are struggling to make ends meet.
All eyes are on the Constitutional Court in the DRC as the country awaits a verdict on the disputed election result. Kenya's government looks at how it can better protect the rights of people born intersex. Also in the program, their very own Olympics. Kenya's Maasai people hold games that unearth the country's next big athletes and promote conservation.
These days I just focus on training to throw a javelin and not a spear to hunt lions. I dream of becoming a world champion.
And in sport, South Africa's Kevin Anderson gets off to a winning start at the Australian Open. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Zimbabweans are in a fury after President Emmerson Mnangagwa more than doubled the price of fuel at the weekend. Now, the anger has spilled onto the streets today in major cities. Authorities say the fuel was underpriced and the increase justified. Shingai Nyoka was on the streets of the capital Harare today as the protests were taking place.
These are some of the reactions to the fuel price increases, fury, and it's spilt onto the streets. I'm here in Epworth in eastern Harare, where the roads have been barricaded by burning tires and stones, preventing the public transport from going into the city. The people that we've seen here say that they're marching into the city to register their discontent against the decision by government.
You must care and you must listen to the people. You must be not above the people. You must listen always.
Our future is being destroyed because of one thing: these prices. We are struggling to make ends meet.
We are protesting because it's come to a time where things are now hitting. You see, people are suffering. People have been quiet for so long, and while the government have no action to take.
Temperatures are boiling here, but in the city centre, businesses were largely shut and people stayed away in solidarity with the trade unions' call to shut down to register their discontent. Amidst the tensions, President Mnangagwa left the country to Russia on a four-nations tour. Many here believe that he should have remained to assure this nation that the problems that they're experiencing are temporary. Shingai Nyoka, BBC News, Harare.
Well, let's go live now to Harare, where we can speak to Debbie Peters. She's an energy finance specialist and also a columnist for the newspaper, the Zimbabwe Independent. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Was there any other alternative for President Mnangagwa but raise the price of fuel?
Hi, good evening. Zimbabwe is a huge crisis of fuel. It's a fuel shortage for money. People are sitting up to 24 hours and 25 days.
All right, we seem to have a crackly line there from Harare. We'll try and get her back as soon as we can, if we can, that is. But for now, let's take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa. Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir has said today that ongoing protests will not lead to a change in government. Amnesty International says that more than 40 people have been killed as security forces used live ammunition to disperse demonstrations. Now, the protests are the most sustained challenge yet to Bashir's rule. Now, a tribunal hearing to decide whether to charge Nigeria's Chief Justice with financial misconduct has failed to take place after he declined to turn up. Walter Onohen was due to answer allegations that he has failed to declare his assets. 45 senior lawyers and over 100 junior lawyers were in court to defend him. Now, two of Senegal's best-known opposition figures have been barred from taking part in next month's presidential elections. One is Khalifa Sall, who was recently sentenced to prison for embezzlement. The other is Karim Wade, who was also found guilty of corruption but was released under a conditional amnesty. The Constitutional Court says President Macky Sall will be allowed to run. Now, the wait continues in the Democratic Republic of Congo for a confirmation of the outcome of last month's disputed presidential election. All eyes are now on the Constitutional Court after objections to the results, which declared Felix Tshisekedi as the winner on Thursday. Runner-up Martin Fayulu has filed an appeal at the weekend challenging the results, and the regional group SADC has been seeking another solution. Gaius Kowene has more.
Martin Fayulu has already filed a challenge at the Constitutional Court, challenging these results because his own party's count showed him winning these elections by a wide margin. And the Catholic Church also say that results published by the Electoral Commission don't match what its own observers collected from the ground. As we are waiting for the court's ruling later this week, two influential regional bodies, the Southern African Development Community and the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, have called for a power-sharing deal in the form of a unity government, but also for a recount of votes just to reassure all the parties. Now, we haven't heard that much from politicians here locally about this call, and it's probably because the outgoing coalition won the majority of seats in the parliament, and that means that the next prime minister is going to come from their group, and that we'll have a de facto power-sharing arrangement with the incoming president if Felix Tshisekedi is confirmed by the Constitutional Court.
Well, let's take you back to our top story in Zimbabwe, where protests have been taking place in major cities across the country over fuel price rises. And we can now go to Harare and speak to Debbie Peters. Debbie, a little earlier I asked you whether the president had any other alternative but to raise the price of fuel.
I'm not thinking of any other alternative. Plus, there's shortage of fuel for months. People were sitting up for 3-4 hours in petrol fuel. And the underlying problem was the price. They were selling petrol in the local currency.
Well, still have a problem with the line there, but you know, technology is technology. Sometimes it fails. But let's move on now, and the Kenyan government is looking into how it can better protect the rights of people born intersex, meaning they have a variety of traits that don't fit into traditional ideas of male or female bodies. Now, a special task force is to come up with recommendations after concerns that intersex babies and children are being put through unnecessary surgery. The UN believes as many as 1.7% of the world is born intersex. Well, the BBC's global gender and identity correspondent Mega Mohan reports from Nairobi.
This is 14-year-old John. His birth was a day of confusion for his mother, Anne.
I asked the doctors what was wrong. They told me they were not sure whether the baby was a boy or a girl, so tests had to be done.
John is intersex-bodied. He's born with ambiguous genitalia. Anne says doctors pressured her to have surgery.
In terms of the surgery, they removed the penis.
Yes, they did.
So you're saying that the doctor didn't give you a choice? They decided that they were going to do the surgery to make your child a girl?
The doctors did not want to be questioned, so I just had to keep quiet.
But as John grew up, he told Anne that he isn't a girl.
I feel like a boy.
Struggling with his identity, John has tried to take his life more than once. Kenya is a country where intersex children are still being killed, and so many parents push for irreversible genital surgery. The Attorney General recently appointed a task force to provide guidance.
We need to be able to support them fully.
Dr. Joyce Mbogo is one of the advisors.
Not many people understood this disorder, and therefore I believe there were many wrong decisions that were made during that period of time. And to those families, I don't know, I can only say I apologize.
Are you feeling emotional?
Yes, sorry.
How come?
Well, it's because it's sad. I mean, the discussion we had with the family where we're saying we're not going to do anything permanent, the parents felt we had disappointed them.
But 8,000 miles away in the American city of Milwaukee, a different approach is being taken by one set of parents.
Gary!
Remember I told you, sit up nice and straight.
Talk normal, no baby talk.
Hi, my name is Rosie.
Rosie is frequently mistaken for a boy, and she knows how to weather that herself. She is capable of taking care of it. She does frequently say, I'm a girl, my name is Rosie.
Oh, Pikachu. Nice.
Rosie was born 6 years ago with ambiguous genitalia. She will need daily medication, but medically she did not need to have surgery. Despite this, doctors still strongly encouraged that Rosie undergo surgery.
And that was his only recommendations. And so I'd asked, well, like, what about the very obvious plan of doing nothing?
Rosie's parents say that they will leave the decision of surgery up to her for when she's older.
So this is about making your body fit into neat boxes. Perfect male, perfect female.
Rosie is a rarity at the moment. But as the discussion around intersex grows, perhaps others will have the choice to follow in her path. Megha Mohan, BBC News.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, in athletics, we catch up with one of the world's fastest women in the 100 meters whilst on a visit to Kenya. Mimi has all the details. I'm Sophie Ikenye and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: furious Zimbabweans have held mass protests across the country after the president more than doubled the price of fuel. In Harare, people blocked roads using rocks and burning tires, and in Bulawayo, police used tear gas to disperse angry crowds. As runner-up, Martin Fayulu appeals the results of the DRC's disputed presidential election. All eyes are now on the Constitutional Court while the voters wait for its ruling. Now, the number of migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe has begun to drop. That's due in part to European countries funding government-linked militia groups in Libya to stop people making the journey. But conditions for those detained are usually grim, and the UN refugee body, has responded by evacuating the most vulnerable migrants to neighboring Niger. They are then processed and resettled in the West. Mike Thompson has this report from Niamey.
Squalid scenes in detention centres like this one, largely funded by EU countries desperate to curb the boats full of migrants arriving in Europe, are common in Libya. Things are even worse for those who are sold on by people traffickers to violent kidnap gangs, where beatings, rape and death are common. Just over a year ago, the UN High Commission for Refugees launched an emergency evacuation scheme aimed at getting the most vulnerable refugees out of Libya. Most were brought to this compound in neighbouring Niger after either being arrested aboard boats or when rescued from kidnappers. Here they'll await offers of resettlement in Europe and North America, the very nations that had helped block their passage out of Libya.
This may look like a prison compound with its barbed wire top walls, but it's actually the place where refugees begin their walk to freedom. When they pass through that white door at the end and tell the story of their time in Libya, they're finally on the road to a new life in the West.
But there was a problem with my family.
Abdul from Somalia arrived here from Libya 3 weeks ago.
I didn't see the sun, yeah. I didn't see it 6 months because we was underground. It was so difficult to breathe. You know, we was sleeping just like a prison, you know. If you want to talk, they will kill you.
After being kept chained up by kidnappers with dozens of people in an underground room, Abdul and 9 others overpowered their guards and were rescued soon after by local police and taken to a detention centre. A bystander films their walk to freedom.
It's unbelievable what you feel. Even after 20 years, 27 years of work in major conflict areas, the emotion is just the same. It's something incredible.
Of the 2,202 refugees evacuated from Libya, 995 have been resettled. 264 have been cleared for resettlement, and the rest are still waiting to hear their fate.
This is music therapy, Niger style. All of the unaccompanied child refugees in this small room on the outskirts of Niamey have been rescued from often horrific experiences in Libya, and now they're learning some memory-soothing melodies.
Okay.
When I first came to Niger, I kept thinking of really bad things, like when one of my friends dies, when we were crossing the Sahara. But I kept busy, and the music and the football are helping me to forget these bad things.
UNHCR estimates that 50,000 other vulnerable refugees, many of them children like these boys, are still trapped in atrocious conditions in Libya. The number of migrants heading north to Europe through Libya has dropped dramatically in recent years, but 1,000 a month are still coming, despite the terrible risks they face. Mike Thompson, BBC News, Niger.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Mimi.
Thank you very much, Sophie. It was a good start for South Africa's Kevin Anderson at the Australia Open. He won his opening match in 4 sets, 6-3, 5-7, 6-2, 6-1 over France's Adrian Manarino, as you can see over there on the screen. And among the day one action was an opening day defeat for former world #1 Andy Murray, who may have played his final match as a professional tennis player. We'll have to wait and see. And South Africa had another win today, but this time in cricket, where they completed a series clean sweep with a 107-run win in the third and final test with Pakistan at the Wanderers Stadium in Johannesburg. Chasing 381 to win, Pakistan were bowled out for 273 on the fourth day. It takes South Africa to #2 in the Test World Rankings. And tributes have continued pouring in for Phil Masinga, who died from a cancer-related illness at the age of 49. He won 58 caps for South Africa, helping them win the Africa Cup of Nations on home soil in 1996. Masinga famously scored the winning goal against Congo to get South Africa to the 1998 World Cup. He's also remembered for his time in the Premier League with Leeds. South Africa Football Association boss Danny Jordan spoke to the BBC about his legacy.
Phil has been part of a generation of Bafana players who helped to establish the brand of Bafana Bafana and lift the football in our area. Played in many other European leagues, and there again he established himself as one of the leading players. For Bafana Bafana, he was part of a special generation of players, and on the African continent they still talk about the players of 1996, or they call themselves the class of 96.
And moving on, Ivorian sprinter Marie-Josée Talou says she will be going to the IAAF's World Championships in an unfamiliar position as a favorite for gold. In 2017, she was a double silver medalist at the World Championships and finished 2018 as one of the fastest women in the 100 meters. Last week, she was in Kenya as a guest of honor in the country's annual Sports Personality of the Year Awards. Celestine Karane with more.
9 years ago, Ivory Coast sprinter Marie-Josée Talou visited Kenya as an inexperienced athlete competing at her first major international event during the 2010 Africa Senior Athletics Championships. This year, she returned with a different status, which includes the fastest woman over the 100 meters in 2018.
I think the welcoming is different because every people are looking at me. Talou, Talou.
The African champion was in Kenya to grace the annual Sports Personality of the Year Awards in Mombasa. Despite being in Kenya's vacation capital, she didn't have much time to rest, as she has already begun preparing for this year's World Championships. In 2019, many are saying Marie-Josée Talou could be the first African woman to win an outdoor world title. How do you manage that expectation?
Really, I'm scared because it gives me too much pressure because I have to be in the top. I have to have a medal. 2 years ago, nobody knows me, so I don't have a pressure.
The Doha-held event will be Talu's 4th World Championships. Celestine Karone, BBC, Mombasa, Kenya.
I just love that she says that she's scared. And finally, in the English Premier League, Manchester City play Wolves today. They will need a win so as to reduce the gap on leaders Liverpool to 4 points. That's all the sports, Sophie.
Yeah, maybe just before you go, there's been plenty of tributes pouring in after the death of Masinga, haven't there? Apart from South Africa, of course.
Well, we had as well Kalusha Bwalia, who tweeted yesterday about the shock. It was big shock in the world of football yesterday. And the CAF Deputy Secretary General Anthony Baffour, former Ghanaian international as well, explained the sorrow and how much he meant for African football.
All right, Mimi, thanks for the sport, but don't go too far because we are well used to seeing Kenyan athletes win medals at the Olympics. But did you know that the country's Maasai people have their very own version of the Games? It's a celebration of the Maasai culture, but it also has another important aim, conservation. For centuries, killing a lion was a rite of passage for Maasai men. But with populations in decline, organizers of last month's Maasai Olympics, they hope now to convince people to hunt medals instead of lions. We went to have a look at the Olympics.
The Maasai Olympics is really an expression of bravery for a lot of these Moran warriors who are here. It has grown by leaps and bounds since its first edition in 2012, and the talents displayed here at the Maasai Olympics is on a high level. The traditional events in the Maasai Olympics are quite unique. Vertical high jump, and we have the javelin, and we have the rungu throwing, which is a different version of the hammer. And they take great pride in excelling or participating in these events.
I am a Maasai Moran. Before Maasai Olympics, I had killed a lion. When I kill a lion, I get a new name, girls love me, and my praises are sung all over the village for showing bravery. Elders will also give me responsibility to be in charge of herds of cattle.
Since we started this initiative in 2012, the rate of killing animals, killing lions, has really gone down, almost to zero.
Once the event started, we saw the benefits of conservation, and I have even become a community ranger. I have won different events since the first Maasai Olympics in 2012 when I was in high school, and the money I won helped me pay school fees.
Kenya at the moment is excelling, is on the rise in field events. It's a great opportunity for our country to showcase events like this, because it shows there is talent all around.
These days I just focus on training to throw a javelin and not a spear to hunt lions. I dream of becoming a world champion. I'd like to tell my fellow Morans who are still killing lions that the practice is now over.
Well, before we go, a quick look again at our top story today here on Focus on Africa. There have been mass protests across Zimbabwe after President Emerson Mnangagwa raised the price of fuel by 125%. Now, demonstrators in the capital, Harare, used burning tires and rocks to block the roads. Elsewhere in Bulawayo, police used tear gas to disperse crowds of angry protesters. The country's main labor federation is calling for a 3-day nationwide strike. The president blames rampant illegal trading in fuel for shortages. He left the country before the protests began and is in Russia on a state visit. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and the rest of the team. I'm on Twitter @Sikenye. For now, thanks for your company. Bye.